Welcome to the PSP Turnkey Solutions educational workshops. Today's topic is training, including sales and HR. With us today are Barbara DeMatteo of Portnoy Messenger Pearl and Ryan Reilly of Sandler Training. Welcome, Barbara and Ryan.
Well, thank you, Jamie. Thank you for the invitation to join the conversation about why training is important for managers and for companies.
Yes, and Jamie, just to sound off of what Barbara was saying, and Barbara, nice to be here with you. Jamie, thank you for having me. Looking forward to learning something today, and I hope you guys are too.
All right, well, we're going to put the pressure on you guys, so you better give us good information and teach us. I guess maybe what I should say is we're really looking forward to your training. With that, Barbara, you talk about, and I love this, transforming your supervisors and managers from good to great.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain that?
Sure, I can. So typically what happens is that we have employees and who become managers because the employees who were super duper widget makers become the managers of the super duper widget makers. But the problem is that these individuals have never been trained on how to be a manager, never been trained on how to be a supervisor. And the best service that a company can give to any of its employees, and especially to its supervisors and managers, is to train them first off on what's the company's culture, because the managers and supervisors are first line, and then to talk about how do we want to manage our staff. Very often managers and supervisors just learn from their prior manager or an old manager, and it can either be something where they're ignoring people or they're being a bully. And teaching a manager how to really be effective with every one of their employees is going to help not only with employee engagement, with attracting applicants, with retaining employees, and continuing to grow an organization. So managers can be taught how to improve and grow from good to great.
All right. Ryan, you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I could not agree more. And it's really, I like that you use the word culture, training on culture, which I heard someone say recently that you can't train culture, you have to develop it. And I was thinking, okay, what's the difference between training and developing? But then I started thinking about what many professionals forget in the beginning steps of this is the assessment, right? Assessing a company first, assessing your own company. What are the strengths and the weaknesses of the managers, the players that you have at play, the CEO, the company, the system, the processes? What are we doing to benchmark those first? And something, as easy as culture, or as hard rather, as culture, one suggestion that, Sandler has always made is looking at it as the personalities, understanding who people are to be effective with them. So something as simple as doing a DISC or a profile assessment in the beginning, that lays the land then for you to understand how somebody may react to you or how you may react to them, as well as sets up how people may want to be appreciated. Maybe, I don't know if anybody's read the book, the Love Language, which has now been translated into the language of business. Mm-hmm. This really applies there. And I'm sure, Barbara, you could talk for days on the language of business and how this applies here.
Okay, so Ryan,
yeah,
what kind of training works best?
What kind of training works best? I'd actually like to share my screen if I could, just a simple document that I'd like to take a look at. So when I look at training, when we work with any company, we like to look at the 4S model, right? And for strength in any structure, you need strategy first. What is the strategy that's going to build the business? So looking at that first, do we have a strong strategy? Do we have the processes and systems in order to support a good working team in place? After that, it's the structure. Structure is who's in the right, do we have the right people in the right seats? Are we having structured right? Do we have implementation ready for the structure and the strategies that we've set? And then it's the staff. So when you say training, I think a lot of people come to the realization of, sales isn't working. what we should do is sales training, when many times it's about looking way deeper down into the triangle of maybe we should really strategize of what we're doing with our sales team, sales methodologies, and then training on the structure and staff. And lastly, that's when you can now put skills, techniques, behaviors behind that staff.
Staying on that for the moment, I remember you saying something about when, I don't want to say companies failing, but when they're not achieving their sales goals, they tend to turn and blame it on the sales people. And here I think you're kind of saying it's not just the failure of the salespeople. It may be the failure of the strategy and structure.
My favorite conversation with any business owner is, if you're going to hire a consultant and the finger gets pointed at you, what is the next step?
I don't know. Anybody want to take a guess? Is there an answer? Ryan, what's the answer?
The answer is, if you're willing to put the work in for your business to grow, then you need to be willing to grow as well. And if it turns out that you may be the problem, then we need to figure out how we're going to strategize to grow out of that and then concentrate on the team. Nobody likes to be told they're wrong, right? And there's a nurturing way with the way you speak about it, the tonality, how you come about it, the questions that you ask that can get someone to realize the challenges that are ahead and how we can, foster through them together.
All right, so turning that back to Barbara, let's say it's not me, but it's, well, I won't say you, but it's our salesperson or a manager of a department, because it's not even just sales. I mean, you deal with managers of all departments.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so how do you deal with when, we'll just, for purposes here, we'll say that that's the person, that's the problem. How do you deal with that problem person?
Well, the first thing is that employees and managers should first be trained on how the company owner wants the company to be run. It's got to start from the top. It's a trickle down, right? If it starts from the bottom, then we all hear that phrase, the inmates are running the operation, right? So we need to run it from the top. And I'm going to go back to culture, because Ryan and I have used that word before. If a company doesn't have a clear set culture that is based upon behaviors, not a vision that's posted on a poster that everybody sees every day, but nobody pays attention to, and we behave that culture, then everybody's behaviors and job performance can be measured against that. Now, we also have to realize that every single employee is a reflection of their manager, and every employee is ultimately a reflection on the company owner. So when customer service is out there and not saying something that's appropriate, it's really the company owner that's saying that. So how is that training happening to say, here's how I want my company run. Here's the goal. Here's who I'm hiring. I'm hiring for competency. I'm hiring for will. Maybe you have a different way of doing it, but ultimately we want to get to this goal. Here's how we want to behave. So all employees and managers should really know how you want your company to run, what your goals are, what are the values that are in place that are critical to your company. And these are to be actually action items. Then this trickles down to something that's really near and dear to my heart. And I talk about it almost every day with every client. And it's that job description. Oh, I get chills, right? So job descriptions. Job descriptions are important for so many reasons, because the challenge that I see all the time is that the manager says, I want Barbara gone. She's been here for 15 years. She hasn't been doing her job for 14 and a half years. She's doing what she wants. And I say, well, where's a job description? Oh, we don't have one. So how does she know what she's supposed to be doing and what she's going to be measured on? Once we have a job description that's well written, because there's also legal implications to that, every employee manager should know what we call the SMART expectations of that job. So SMART, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time bound. We all know that. Now there's no ambiguity. It's nice and clear. We can move down the road. We can coach. We can mentor. We can talk to employees and talk about how to improve their performance instead of being something that is ad hoc. It's going to lead to a positive reputation of the company and the manager.
So what should we be training our managers on?
How to be managers of people is the first piece. Ryan, you mentioned DISC in the beginning, and I am a big proponent of DISC. I just teach DISC all the time. And what DISC is that it's a way for people just simply to understand why are there differences between people's communication. Before I teach a manager how to manage people, you have to know how to talk with people, because one size does not fit all. Clearly, think about those outfits. One size does not fit all on a lot of people. And communication doesn't fit for one size fits all. I have to know how to adapt to Jamie in order to connect. I have to know how to connect with Ryan in a different way, and perhaps with Patrick and with Keith and with Angela and with John, because everybody has something a little bit different that's important to them. And unless I am talking with somebody eye to eye, I'm missing the mark and communication is off. So we start out all of our management training with DISC training to understand how to adapt to another person's conversation, to their way of thinking. It's treating others as they wish to be treated, not treating others as I wish to be treated, which is what my mother taught me very many years ago.
I like that you say that. I did that. We did that in the company years ago, and it was really uncanny in educating each of us on how to, I'll say, deal with or influence our coworkers, or in getting what we want accomplished. And in a family business, I recognized how I best communicate with my brothers to get what I wanted done versus what maybe they wanted done when we had conflict.
Mhm.
And it's an eye opener. Again, just to repeat what you're saying is, it's to communicate with that person in the way they want to be communicated with.
Mhm.
All right. Going back to this is for both of you. This is a toss up. So whoever grabs it first, but both of you get this one. Back in my old college days, I was a management trainee. I went to business school for management, and we had this never ending battle or question of, does the manager need to know how to do the work that the workers are doing? Either of you want to talk about that?
It depends, I would say. Barbara, do you mind if I take a stab at this one? I would say it depends. There's many different factors that are there. I would say size of company may be relevant here. Obviously, smaller companies are going to need what's called a bag holding manager, someone who can do the work as well as manage the people. That doesn't always work with smaller companies or larger companies, but that may be more of a necessity for them to understand exactly how everything works in the company. At a higher level, the simple answer I would say was no. If somebody can really coach people, manage the expectations, and be someone that they can be open to, and like Barbara had said before, going from top down, recognizing the vision and the mission of the company and being able to express that and manage the expectations for people to be able to go towards those goals while also recognizing the personalities. I don't think it matters what they're selling. It's really the managing of the people that matters. That's their job.
Mhm. Mhm. And to tie on to that, Ryan, I'm agreeing with you. So it really does depend, because you think about large organizations. Now, they may have started in the basement, and the owner may have learned every single thing about every single thing that's going on in order to create that product, whatever it may be. And now they're a multi-million-dollar company, but they may not know the details of how the accounting works. They may not know the details of how that new machine works. They may not know the details of how the shipping and receiving is going to be happening, but they're setting the expectations that's tied to their culture, to their goals and their vision, which is all based upon behaviors. So sometimes it can be very helpful, but I don't think that it's necessary to happen. That's why we have layers of management or who are the people who do know what's happening online.
I think you guys, you nailed that one. It's something that I've thought about for, I won't tell you how many years I'm out of school, but it's the age-old question that we used to have as managers is, it's about managing people. But Ryan, you really put it well in, it really depends on the organization.
So,
But you've reinforced our management
so I could,
message of
I'd like to give an
we could manage anybody.
I'd like to give an example of a company who's and I'm failing to remember the name right now, but there's a surfboard company. The man is the most successful surfboard maker in the world. He's never surfed. Doesn't like the water. He doesn't surf, but he understood how to build the board, how to do the thing, and that's what he did. But he's never surfed before. So people buy this and they ask him questions about how the board will float in the water and how it works. He understands that dynamics of it, but never had to actually do it himself. And he created that. And then underneath him, then he put people in place that could manage the expectations of customers that want to know about the waves and how we'll ride in the wave and all that. So it's surrounding yourself again with the right people. And to go back to the purpose of this entire talk, training them on how your business, the vision and the mission of your business is, although they bring their own knowledge of the practicality of the business.
And I just
All
want
right.
to add on to what Ryan is saying, if I can. It's surrounding yourself with the right people. You're 100% right. But we're not the idea is not to surround yourself with yes men, because we know that that is not going to help senior management. I'm seeing a lot of shaking heads in agreement on that. You want to hire people and bring people around you who are going to challenge you, who is going to ask those questions, who are going to play devil's advocate. We're going to say, well, what are we going to do here? Is this really the decision that we want to make? Not necessarily to question the CEO or owner, but to ask questions. So this way we're coming to the right solution. I think that's one of the big problems that I see out there, is that there's a lot of yes people, and that's not helping with a company's growth.
Absolutely. And I'd like to add to that. You had said something earlier about making sure that we had culture as one of the words we were using a lot before, and creating a atmosphere, a culture that respects and likes training and does assessments. When you do a disc profile assessment, when somebody first comes in, they understand it's for them. When you wait and you don't do any of this, you don't do training, you don't do assessments, and then you start to do them, it creates a different culture, a different vibe, because people are looking at it as, why are they now looking at us as we need to be assessed, or we need to now? It's different. So creating the culture where training is something that you have as the forefront. We want to have people that are learning. We want to have people that are going out there, not yesing us, but understanding that they're going to bring their own to the company. We're okay with you failing as long as you come to us and explain that. And I think one of the David H. Sandler used to say, was one of my favorite things. You can't get mad at anyone for doing something you never told them they couldn't do. And the theory there is, be clear, be concise, be impeccable with your word. When you're setting up, like you said earlier, with the contracts for employees and job descriptions, this is what's expected of you, but also this is what you can expect from me as the owner. I'm going to push you for training. I'm going to push you for assessments. I'm going to push you to be better. And I hope you'll do the same. I want to make that point.
I love it. And you know what? I've always thought that the most important job that we have is hiring. If you hire the right people, the rest is easy. And you answered one of my questions before I even got to answer it. So bingo. And that was when to institute training. And I guess your answer is in the beginning.
Well, Jamie, you and I have actually talked about this, and recently I've ran into some companies that waited too long. So the timing of training, the answer is yes. It's ongoing. It's always implemented in the beginning. What many people do is they wait till a problem has persisted for too long and then try to fix it. I always say, if you're looking for sales training, we are there to bring a company to the next level, not to save a company. So if a company is too far gone, you've waited too long, and that can go for any aspect of your company. If you wait too long, it's too hard to do. And remember, the most difficult conversations are usually just difficult in your head. They're easy to have once you get there and have them if you have the right approach.
I'll argue with you on only on one point, and that is the old question of, when do you advertise? When do you increase your marketing budget? When you're selling a lot and you got a lot of money to spend, or when you're not selling and you have no money to spend and you need the customer? You're saying, sometimes you're too far gone. do you ever get to the point where you say to a company, write it off? It's not worth spending the money on sales training because you're not going to make it.
So that's exactly what I'm saying is, more recently we spoke with a company, and when we looked at what their run rate was, what they could spend in order to save to the sales team before running out of money, the dividends didn't make sense. It wouldn't have made sense for them to spend money on training to be able to get there. We wouldn't have been able to turn it around because they have a very long sales cycle. So, these companies that have short sales cycles, that might be something that's there. But when you look at the entirety of the company and you're looking at 3 to 5 month sales cycles, but your run rate, the amount of money you could spend before burning out of it, is only 3 to 4 months, we're not going to get there in time. And I'd rather them put the money where they need it to save their company, or to look at their people and figure out what the exit strategy is, rather than try to save something that may be too far gone, for me anyway.
I have to say that's interesting and fascinating. Let's move to human resources and some of that area of training. And Barbara, the question is, what does a manager need to know about limiting liability with a company?
Yeah,
It
so
sounds very ominous.
it is very ominous, because liability is money, liability is dollars, liability is paying somebody out because we did something wrong. And, I believe in what Ryan is doing. I believe in Sandler. We're bringing the sales. Let's keep the sales. Let's continue to use the money that we are bringing in from our revenue to build our company, to build our people, instead of paying it out on claims. Because it's not only the dollars that are being paid out, and now it's going to be in the news, it's going to be on the federal and local and state governmental labor websites of what happened with the company and how much was paid out, but it's also the value of the time that is also a liability to an organization. People don't think about that. Not only during the investigation, but the liability of the time of employees chit-chatting about what happened and stirring the pot, and the gossip rumor mill just kind of takes away from morale and motivation and everything else. So where do we start? As soon as a company decides to fill a position, there's potential liability. It starts before you even hire somebody. So you talked before about hiring the right people. You're absolutely right. First off, it's everyone's responsibility to make sure that the job description is correct, that it's comprehensive, and that you can develop and clearly communicate smart expectations of every one of the responsibilities. Otherwise, it's ambiguous, it's unclear, and no one knows what's going to be going on. We recently, a company wrote a job description, they hired somebody, and finally they said, no, that's really not what the job is. We rewrote it, and they had to rescind the offer because the guy didn't have the right qualifications and couldn't meet what they were looking to do. That's not good press for a company. So the ad has to be written very correctly. We can no longer say in an employment ad certain language. We can't say we want energetic employees. We all want energetic employees, right? Because an individual on the outside can say, oh, you want an energetic employee? That means you're discriminating against me because of my age and my disability. So the words in your advertising have to be very careful and very consciously used. And Ryan, you used the word before, which I've talked about in the past, be impeccable with your word, because that's what's important. Now, this is out there for everyone to see. So the ad has to be written in accordance with the law and not create the perception that a company is going to discriminate on any of the protected categories, race, color, religion, national origin, that kind of a thing. And the interview itself is also a potential for liability. The minute you start bringing somebody in, I suggest 100% of the time, whether you do it electronically, and I prefer it in writing, have every applicant fill out an employment application, not just a resume. A resume is a marketing brochure. I write fabulous resumes for family and friends, but my employment application is signed by the employee saying everything here is truth and the best of my knowledge, and I promise if I lied, I know I can be fired and not hired. So an employment application is key. The questions that an interviewer is going to ask are key. I can't tell you that I still hear all the time managers and interviewers asking, so when are you getting married? How many kids you got? You pregnant yet? Do you have any caregiving responsibilities? What's going on? And they're asking all of these personal questions about race, color, religion, national origin, and that's a problem. They also are not trained on how to handle the applicant who brings up the question. Oh, so I see the beautiful pictures of your family behind your desk. My kids are around that same age, and they get into a child conversation or a grandchild conversation. Little does the interviewer know, but that applicant can be setting them up. They pose the question, the interviewer got involved in the conversation, they weren't hired, the applicant says, I was discriminated against because of. And I hope you never meet any of these people that I have met in my career where they come into a company to interview with you to get hired and set you up for a lawsuit. So, and managers need to be trained on that whole process right from the start in limiting liability. And that's only the first piece of it.
You're scaring me.
Good.
I guess rightfully so.
Yeah.
I am my grandfather, is what I'm hearing, and I'm listening to it. And I've known you for many years, and we joke the simple things that I say that are potentially hazardous to my health, without intention.
Yeah.
And it's like listening, and I say that it's like listening to our grandparents, how they spoke and how we would cringe as children. And I'm cringing now at myself. It makes me very concerned. Can a company fire an at-will employee?
Sure.
That was easy.
Okay,
All
but
right.
it's not that easy. Let me go back on that. You know that I have a lot more to say.
I knew there was something else there.
Okay, so New York State and many states across the country are employment at will. What does employment at will mean? It means that you can hire me for any period of time and you can let me go at any time. It means that I can come to work for you for any period of time and I can leave whenever I want. Okay, that's what employment at will means. It's a free here and there. You can fire somebody under employment at will as long as it's not for a discriminatory reason. Now, I don't believe that any one of us are going to consciously say, I'm firing Barbara because she's an older woman. I'm firing Jamie because he's practices this religion. I'm going to doubt that any of us are going to fire somebody for a reason that is because of race, color, religion, national origin, and all the protected classes, right? That would be silly of us to do. But here's what happens. It's too easy for an employee to make a discrimination claim. So Barbara's been working for you for 3 years, 5 years, 15 years, 5 days. And the subtle comments around the office have been around her race, color, religion, national origin, blah, blah. But the manager didn't really say anything. Everyone kind of thought it was funny. There were jokes. There were this, there were that. She got offended. Now, she may have been inept in her job, or suddenly, because of all this chit chat, she's backing off and saying, I can't concentrate on my job. And she's fired because it's employment at will. She is going to turn around and go to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the state and the local community divisions on human rights, and say, I was discriminated against because these are the comments that went around me. And the problem happens is that very often managers have no documentation of why you're firing Barbara. What happened with her job performance, which is forcing you to make that decision to let her go? What was the impetus after 15 years in order to say, here was a situation that finally I said, that's enough, even after I've given her raises and promotions and bonuses over time? All of a sudden, something's wrong. Maybe she turned 40. Maybe a couple of years after that. Maybe suddenly I've got a disability and I've got a back issue. Maybe suddenly because an employee became pregnant. I can't have pregnant people working here. That's going to create a problem for me. So it doesn't take much for an employee to file a claim if they believe that they were discriminated against, even though a company is not intentionally doing that. So if anybody is going to be fired for any reason at any point in time, regardless of the length of employment, what is going to help in a potential litigation is the manager being very specific with their documentation. On this date, this happened, this is what I did, here's a signature that I got, here's the documentation, and so forth. But sadly, what happens is that managers and owners say to me, I don't have time to do that documentation. I have a job to do. Well, I have an epiphany for you. Anybody who is a manager or a supervisor or an owner, that is your job. That's your responsibility to make sure you're documenting it so you can prove in the future that you can limit your liability, but more importantly, it's the communication to the employee saying, I am hearing you fully and I am treating you fairly. And I'm giving you an opportunity to improve.
Go back to before you go there, go back to the point of, do I need to know the job or do I need to manage the people? And if you're the manager, you just answered it. Your job is managing the people. Ryan, you had something to add, and then I've got a trick question for you.
Sure. I really enjoy listening to you, Barbara, because yes, like Jamie said, it's terrifying, but it's also reassuring to know that we're not the only ones saying it, that managers need to do their job. One thing that I did hear that I differ a little bit on is when it comes to sales, because that's really where we concentrate on. When we create a sales playbook, we also create what's called a corrective action plan that's built within the sales. That's a contract that they sign that is aligned with the company handbook that says that they're going to keep themselves accountable, they being the sales team, to certain metrics that we want, KPIs that are there, scorecards that we're keeping. Now, many managers believe that it takes too much time, right? That's why they don't do it. Let's admit the systems that are in place, the reason that we don't follow them is because they're too difficult or too time consuming. So a suggestion we often make is, let's admit that our sales team, we hired them as adults, professionals is what we hired them as. So let's have them hold themselves accountable. So each week, what I do is I sit down as a manager and I say, what are your numbers? Where are you productivity wise? And I keep track of those. I don't have to do the numbers, but I keep track of them. So therefore, on the corrective action plan, it says after 2 consecutive months at 75% or below of your quota, your goal, your track, whatever it is, your target, then we have to have a verbal warning. Then there's a written warning, and then there's possible termination. Now, what this does is, number one, it keeps the person accountable to themselves. And number two, when it comes to firing somebody, all you have to do is look back through the notes and say, here's the corrective action plan. Here's your level. And if we graph these, then here's the firing line. This is where you are. What do you suggest we do?
Mm-hmm.
And there's one big thing there. Now, when we talk about training, are we coaching up or are we coaching out? This is the decision we have to make.
And just to your point, Ryan, I just want to add, it goes back to those SMART expectations. So if they're holding themselves accountable to the numbers, those numbers are SMART. So the employee is going to know what's going on. The manager is going to know what's going on. And then you start taking them down that route. And then we have to treat everybody consistently.
Yeah.
That's the important piece. Otherwise, that's going to be a discrimination claim.
So Barbara, you might like this, and I'm happy if you steal it. SMART goals, add the extra ER, smarter, enjoyable, and rewardable at the end.
I love it. I love it.
Well,
thank you. I will use that.
The good news or bad news is you kind of answered my trick question, and that was your function is, your perceived the primary function is to train and teach people to be better salespeople, make more sales. And my question was going to be, how do you measure, and what do you do for those who don't achieve? And you just kind of laid all that out, which is perfect because
let's go back to this, right? If there's no structure, there's no strategy, it doesn't matter how well you're trained your staff is. Eventually you'll have a really, really, really good sales professional rather, and they could leave. Then what happens? The staff, the structure, the strategy doesn't support continuing with the success. And part of that strategy is corrective action plan. If it's not there and it's not signed by every single employee that's in that department and understood by management below, you're setting yourself up for a fight later, especially when you're dealing with sales professionals. Let's admit, they could be a little toothy.
And they can sell.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes their best sale is themselves.
And I just want to add to what Ryan's talking about. Not only applies to salespeople, it applies to everybody. It applies to accounting, it applies to marketing, it applies to production, it applies to everyone. And it's all holding accountability. And here's the other challenge that I also find, is that very often when I look at manager job descriptions, right, I'm a manager of people. The biggest piece that's missing is a job responsibility that I am managing people. Everything else on that job description is that I got to get the stuff out the door. I got to work with everybody and get all the stuff done. But managing people is not even there. So you have a manager and you're not even evaluating them on how they're doing that. And that's also a light bulb that goes off in companies.
Oh,
So
we
when
need, if it's
add
light
that-
bulbs, if it's light bulbs, we need Jay Ryan. We need those new LED bulbs.
We
But I
do.
want to jump on something now for a second, because Ryan has a problem. And I
Mhm.
think this could be somewhat serious. And that is, he used his discretion and judgment and made an exception with one of the employees.
Mhm.
How much trouble does that cause?
Well, that's your new precedent. There you go. So when a manager very often says, well, I have the ability to use discretion, an owner says, I have the ability to use discretion because it's my business, so I can do what I want. Well, kind of, sort of, no. Because as soon as you make one, you have a policy and you go outside of that policy, and now you're not going to treat everybody fairly in the same way going forward. When Barbara doesn't get that benefit, I'm going to claim gender, sex discrimination, age discrimination. My back hurts today, so maybe it's disability discrimination. Let's see what else. Maybe it's my national origin, maybe it's my religion, maybe it's my parental status, my marital status. Maybe it's a bunch of those different things. And that's not why you decided not to give it to me, but I'm claiming you gave it to Jamie, who's a white male, but you didn't give it to me, and I am very different from him. So once you make a decision that is outside of your policy, you are setting the new precedent, and that can be a problem for you. And it can
So
turn to a
does,
discrimination claim.
so does setting policy create its own trouble? Because if you set it and don't follow it, would you be better off not having a clear policy and therefore, get away with things?
Your precedent, it doesn't matter if you have a policy with, if you set a precedent. So if your precedent is that you're giving raises to all of the men because they're super duper, and your precedent is that women get raises 2-3 months later, that may not be a policy, it may not be something in writing, but that's how you're behaving, and that's what's creating a problem. So please always remember that using discretion is not right. When an employer tells me I want in my policies in my handbook to say I have the ability to use discretion, I said, fine, replace that word right now with the word discrimination and see how that runs for you.
Barbara, is there an opportunity to replace that word with performance? So people say discretionary bonuses, performance bonuses. Are we in a better place if we use that?
Well, discretionary bonuses are fine. That word and discretionary bonuses are fine because every employer has the ability to make a discretionary bonus. You can do that. That's not a problem. But I'm talking about, I'm going to give somebody, Jamie's had an issue with coming in on time because he's got something going on at home. Barbara's got an issue with coming in on time because she's got something going on at home. But, Jamie is, he's the dude. He's the guy. So you know what? No problem. We'll just let it go. And suddenly Barbara, who's got a similar issue, is being called on the carpet and saying, why are you late? Well, I got my kids, I got this, I got the bus, I got the school, you have to be here on time. So the precedent of letting Jamie getting away with it and not allowing me to get away with it, I'm clearly going to file a discrimination claim. So
I want to go on record as feeling that I'm feeling very discriminated here, being picked on, and always being, the man of privilege here. I appreciate that, but I want to make sure that you and I are being treated equally and fairly. I want to end with one question, then open it up to the rest of you for any questions you may have. And that is, in this day and age, there's this new thing out there called technology, and it's kind of happening fast. So how is the use of technology changing and influencing how we do our training in both sales and in human resources?
Sure. I'm getting the nod there from Barbara. Obviously, the market has changed. We use the word culture, maybe too many times today. How is it so difficult to create a culture now? And I think when we talk about training and we talk about culture and we talk about companies and we talk about technology and how we're utilizing it more, that's why it's so important to have culture as something you embed in your mission and your vision, because it's top down again. It's not something that throwing a pizza party every Friday is gonna bring your culture back together. It's how you see yourself within a company. It's how your vision and how you attach yourself to that vision. For me, technology has greatly changed the landscape at which we deliver our products. So training is moved a lot to virtual. Will that stay there? I'm not sure. However, our position is that utilizing technology like AI, like Zoom, other platforms, they're not going to replace the human, the human side of it. They're not going to replace the in-person stuff. However, the professionals that adapt, adopt, and apply technology for themselves are going to replace those who do not. So our job is to figure out how to leverage the technology in order to supplement our intelligence. So rather than artificial intelligence, a word that Sandler has started using is adapted intelligence. So how we're adapting and using it in our world. I think that's said best, by Sandler. So I'll leave it there. Adapt to stay up with it. If you fall behind, everyone knows, that there was that one guy 6 years ago that still had a BlackBerry. The BlackBerry was a great phone, but it was time to move on from the flip phone, out of the BlackBerry, and now into, the smartphone. It just, for business, it made sense. So when we talk about technology, there's the 20% who are way ahead of the game. There's the 20% who are never going to get there. They don't want to get there. And then there's the rest of us. That's where we all need to go back to the word train. There is everything at your fingertips. I don't know anything about everything. I can say that statement. So I go on webinars all the time. I read books. However, most of these books I also have on Audible because I like to listen to it that way. So it's at your fingertips. So when I run into somebody who says, I don't know, I don't like that statement, because that means I don't care enough to go and find out.
Technology is changing how training is getting done. I still am of the firm belief, as much as I can, I'm in-person training. The value of manager training, it's a one-on-one. Disc training is really valued at one-on-one, because I need that interaction around a U-shaped table, across people, with people. That conversation becomes something different. That to me is something that's important. It doesn't mean that I have not adapted to doing it online. I just don't believe it's as effective. It's the same as anti-harassment training, sexual harassment training. I believe the more I can do that in person, the more I can really interact with individuals and drive it home. Online, it just changes the conversation a little bit. But the bottom line to all of training and what we're talking about is accountability. And here's where I think that companies are losing out on their returns of investment. How often have we been sent to training classes in our past? We were so excited. We ran back into the office, couldn't wait to implement all these things. And then what happened? 24 to 48 hours, it hits the fan again. So everything I wanted to do is out. So no one's holding anybody accountable. In the training that I deliver, I have accountabilities. What are we going to do? How are we going to follow up? And I think that that's what's important. And Keith, it's to what you were talking about. It's making sure that whatever it is I'm training, whether it's sales, whether it's production, whether it's quality, whether it's whatever it may be, hold the individual accountable, tie it to that job description, give them that kind of whatever format of performance appraisal, because people do want to know how they're doing. So this way, there's no surprise when suddenly you say to Barbara, you know what, I sent you to training, you never did anything with it, so you're out. Well, wait a second. Who had the conversation with me to see how we can integrate this into the company? So I think that there's two sides to that. And yeah, we do need to adapt, but it's still, I don't know, it's tough. It's tough.
I see it coming. I think that a hybrid model is going to be the future. I can't wait to get, Barbara, to speak on my own experience. I came into Sandler during this virtual transition. And I cannot wait to get back to some more in person. I do a lot of speaking engagements, and I love that human interaction. You see that aha moment. It's different.
Mhm.
So I definitely think we're going to get back there, but there are so many companies that want nothing to do with ever going back. So that's what I meant by adapt. It's just making sure we can do everything all at once.
All right. So I lied. I have one more question.
Always.
And this is for Barbara. As you know, I have a 22-month grandson, and I am watching him learn and grow. And just it's amazing to watch the new things that he's doing. I'm training him. I mean, we're teaching him the sounds of all the different animals. So what's the difference in training your employees as compared to training your young children?
There's clearly a difference between your employees and the children in and around your lives. You have a grandson, okay? My first question is, how many of you, by a show of hands, would agree with me that your children are clearly a reflection on you? Okay. How many of you would agree that every one of your employees is clearly a reflection on you? Double, right? Now, when we're teaching and growing and working with our children in and around our lives, how often do we talk to them? How many of you talk to your children once a year? Oh, once a quarter? Oh, once a month? No. Daily? Why? Why? What do you do to talk with them on a daily basis? Ryan, what do you talk about?
Oh man, what makes them happy? What makes them sad? Expectations for the day, what we're looking at for tomorrow, why we don't like the show right now that we liked yesterday, how things are changing, why the sky is blue. Who knows?
Okay. And Jamie, what do you talk about?
Baseball.
Okay.
I mean, but you're right. And I listen to everybody, and each child, it's a different conversation, but it's all about life.
Okay. So if you're investing that much time in your children who are a direct reflection on you out in the world, why is it that we only speak with our employees once a month, once a quarter, once a year at their performance appraisal? You would never do that with a child. If you are mentoring and coaching and learning and listening and talking with, not talking at, and helping them grow and talking about the next stages and how can we improve as an organization, to me, these are similar conversations that should happen. Obviously, the topics are different, but how much more engaged will every employee feel if we as managers are having those ongoing proactive conversations? They're going to feel better or worse? How many of them are going to feel more engaged? How many of them are going to stay with you for a longer period of time? How many of them are going to talk to everybody on the outside about what a great company it is to work for? So you're going to attract talent, you're going to retain talent. So to me, there's a very big similarity because remember, employees are a reflection on you. And who has the ability in order to influence that is you as a manager.
Well, I just want to thank both Barbara and Ryan. We're coming to the end of our hour. So I guess give you your closing remarks. Though those were pretty good closing remarks. So if you want to add anything to that, now's a good time, Barbara.
Train your people, learn what it's all about, focus on smart expectations, make sure the job responsibilities are clear. So this way everyone knows and hold everyone accountable. Don't let things slide because I don't have time because I've got a job to do. This is your job. This is our jobs. And this is how we're going to keep our businesses alive.
And Ryan?
I learned something new today. If you could learn something new every day that says it's a good day, we have the opportunity. This was phenomenal for me. I hope that we were able to impart some knowledge, some suggestions that may work in your business today as actionable items. And Barbara, I must say, I will give you credit. That was amazing to hear from you and to listen to you, and that exercise about children and employees and how to do that. I will give you credit once when I talk about it. I'll forget who said it the second time, and I'll probably steal it the third time.
That's okay. I'll take the ER on smart too.
Now, I think I'm going to leave you all with, you are who you associate with. and training is training is an always an ongoing job.
Mhm.
Thank you, everybody. Barbara, Ryan, I give you both A+. So isn't that's performance appraisal? Because performance appraisal is always an ongoing. So A+ for both of you. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. This is another in the series of educational workshops from PSP Turnkey Solutions. I'm still Jamie Austin, and if you want an introduction to either Barbara or Ryan or any of our other 45 partners, just give me a buzz. Everybody have a great day.